Into my talk. I'm going to be talking about hiring ethically and empathetically. So I'll do a quick intro about myself. My name's Muyu. I've been a gameplay programmer in the industry for about 20 years. I worked on games like Little Big Planet, I've been playing recently Night Spikes and stuff that's regular. But at the beginning of the year, I started a new micro studio called Artichoke. And our goal is to make games with a little heart. And so part of that is the games we make, so trying to tell emotional stories that have a diverse range of stories. But the other part, I think, to me, probably the more important part is how we make them. I want to treat everyone fairly. I really believe in work-life balance, financial transparency. I wrote the third one down, so I forget about diversity. Yeah, that's another key one. And so, I thought, like, if I'm really focused on trying to build the right culture for my studio, I needed some help. I'm a programmer by trade. I needed some writing help and some art help. And I thought I really should spend some time thinking about the hiring process. It's been a while since I've done it, but also I feel like a lot of places I've been haven't really done it right. So I just, took a little bit of time and put together, a few job descriptions, posted them up on Twitter. And basically it's a new team, nothing is announced about the project. And I posted 2 jobs, and I was really surprised to get 350 applications for these 2 roles. 40% of the applications came from underrepresented genders, and there was a large amount of applications from disabled people and people of color as well. I didn't really take the time to spreadsheet that out, but it was pretty surprising. But the thing that surprised me most, because I have lots of friends that reach out to me saying, like, we're really having trouble finding anyone on our team that doesn't look like the rest of our team. The thing that was kind of most surprising to me is just like at every single step of the process, people kept saying thank you. And I was like, for what? Like, I need your help. And it just sort of made me realize, well, the bar for this stuff seems like it's really, really low, the way that applicants are treated. And then I just, off the top of my head, came up with what I thought was the bare minimum in each of these categories, and sort of put that out there, and people seemed really appreciative of it. So I thought, maybe I'm going to talk about how to reach the low bar of hiring. That's probably what I should have called the talk. I think the only caveat I'll give is that, like, these are all things that work for me in hiring these 2 roles, but we're just at the beginning. I'm not promising that these will scale out to a 1,000-person company. I also know a lot of companies have a lot of different motives, like extracting value from employees for shareholders and things like that. And a lot of these things apply if that's the kind of company you're running. So the 4 topics I'm going to talk about are job descriptions, how I thought about writing the job descriptions. The second one is how I thought about figuring out how much to pay individuals for these roles. The process I went through reviewing the applications and actually interviewing people. And lastly, and most importantly, this is where I got the most thank yous, sending by hand 350 rejection letters. So yeah, let's start with the first part, job descriptions. The number of job descriptions, I started doing more and more looking at them since I was writing this talk, and they're generally horrible. I really, really get very aggravated at, like, the salary ranges I see on them, or salaries not included whatsoever, or impossible criteria to reach. I know when I came to this country from the UK, or from the US, I sat home to the job description that was written for me was actually impossible to reach. So the visa agency said, like, he doesn't have these requirements. I was explaining them. It was requirements that was physically impossible. There's no one on earth that had this level of experience. And eventually they kind of waved our hands around it. So yeah, the first thing I'll put is all the key information should be up front. It should be I was very focused on not wasting people's time. So I thought it was very, very important to put all the key information up front. So how much it pays, what geographical requirements there are, how much time it's for, and also I made sure to say that, like, if I'm going to make you do work for my company, you're going to get paid. Like, I think it's a little bit abominable how much time people require from applicants just to either not offer them something, or in the worst case, if they don't disclose the salary, to offer them an extremely low-ball salary, hoping, I've gone through such a process, I might as well take this horrible offensive salary. So those are the things that I put up front. I think they're very, very important. I think the salary range, or the salary of the job is the thing I think most people aren't doing and really need to be doing, because you really don't want people to waste time putting in an application, writing a cover letter, doing tests, doing an interview, all this kind of stuff, having no idea what you're actually offering on the other side. I just don't think it's a fair thing to do. And then the next part was the actual description itself. So I really believe that you should write, and I think there's actually research about this, that you should write tasks, not requirements. So instead of saying, oh, we need someone with 5 years of experience in the industry, think about what is the skill that you think they bring to the table because they have 5 years of experience. Because one, it's probably not that well correlated with 5 years of experience, but two, like there's definitely anecdotal evidence, but I think research evidence as well, that the more marginalized you are, the more you feel like you need to meet 100% of the requirements before you can apply for something. So when you're fighting self-selection on job applications, if you literally put the absolute bare minimum requirements, which are, I actually need someone to do this work, like this, like we can't get any less than that. There's a lot of people that read that and they think, I do this every day, like I can definitely do this. Where even if you put things like, what's one that I'm like, excellent communication skills. Mm-hmm. The more marginalized you are, the more you're going to be like, good communication skills. Are they excellent? Like, would it reach that bar? Should I apply? Am I wasting people's time? Am I embarrassing myself? I think there's a concept that I heard termed as rep sweats. And this idea that the more marginalized you are, the more you feel like if something goes wrong here, they're going to blame my entire demographic. And I think there's also precedent for this, and that is the more marginalized you are, the more likely it is going to say like this person of this descent did this horrible thing, or if it's just like something like that, guys like us and things, it's very vague. So I think there's a self-selection process, but also there's that weight that you feel that probably contributes to the self-selection process. So I focused on specifically what is this person really doing, and I split it up into 2 parts to be like, okay, here's stuff I absolutely need, and here's stuff that would be nice. So I was hoping that psychologically at least it would feel like, if I do these 4 things, that's 100%. If I do these 8 things, it's 200%. Like it's all bonus from there. And the company that I kind of stole this format from is a company called Globate, and I like theirs even better. I was hiring for short-term contracts. What they have is, here's the stuff we need you to be able to do from day one, and here's the stuff that within 6 months we'll work with you to develop. I think that's a much better way to phrase this kind of stuff. It lets you filter for like, is that actually a direction that I want to be moving into? And is this company going to support and grow, help me grow, one of these things? So I think that's a bit better. Those 6 months, 1 day a week. And I'm not a writer, I'm not an artist, I wasn't going to teach anything in that amount of time. I needed help. And I guess the next thing I did was, I thought about like, okay, specifically the main storyline is about gender-based gatekeeping. I'm like, well, I better have someone that has lived experiences of gender-based gatekeeping to write this story. So, I put in some things in there, for example, familiarity with experiences of gender-based gatekeeping. I think that's one of the things that helps tip the scale of percentage of applications that I got from women and underrepresented genders. But I also think that it's just really important to give a vibe of your company. So I put in my in joke. So I really get annoyed when companies have these super meanie in jokes in the job application. It's basically if you're not already one of us and play our game 100 hours a week, you're not welcome to this job. I just want to make sure that it was good. That one, I might ask this writer a ton of questions because it did happen. But also everyone in this team is welcome to ask questions outside of their area of expertise. I just want to make that very clear from the get-go that obviously people will be trusted in their area of expertise to do their work, but you can always take an interest in game design or writing or even code if you want to go outside of your core discipline. And I couldn't do much. I had no budget and no art, so I just wrote a big paragraph. I don't do the paragraph, it's just the concept. But I wanted to give a little bit of a feel of what kind of company I was trying to build here, and the whole thing I said about games with a little heart, whether it's the games itself or how we approach them. It's the best thing I could do with zero budget to convey what kind of team I had. But I think there's a lot of things that go pretty far. I think the kinds of games you're making, the specific game you're working on. I think team photos go a long way. If you've got a team photo and people see a lot of intersectional diversity in there, if you have a lot of bios of senior management that are very diverse, I think it makes people feel this is, at least from the outside, a safe space for me to exist. And there's people that have existed in this space for a long period of time that look like me. So I think that's a good way to widen the kinds of applicants you're likely to get to the position. Oh yeah, I guess the other thing is I know a lot of because the team was just me, a lot of my brand is also that I'm heavily involved in organizations like Feeling Great or Talking About that kind of stuff. I think I don't know how far that goes, but I definitely think it's a way to signal that you care at least a little bit, at least the outside. Yeah, so that's sort of my job description. The next thing I want to talk about money is money. So I'm American. We're very, very comfortable talking about money. I know that's less the case in this country, so I'll try and phrase it a little bit gently. But I'm going to talk about 4 lenses that I use to think about how much am I going to pay people for these positions. So one thing that I'm personally not a strong believer in is that I'm not a big believer that capitalism is great at figuring out what people are worth. I think that's, I don't know, I think it gets a little bit wild. So I think, for me, it was very much thinking what do I think a person's time working on their project is, rather than did you happen to get into a field that's in high demand now, or became high demand in the last 20 years, and if you live 40 years from now, or 40 years in the past, you'd be worth a totally different amount of person. I just don't think the time that you were born to have that much of a variance on what your worth is in society. That's just a personal thing. So yeah, I started at the bottom. I started with the question of how much money do I have? And I set out the goals of saying, I want to build this prototype fit for financing, and I spec'd out all the features in that prototype, and I made a list of all the features that I couldn't do, and I put them in the job descriptions, and I figured out how much time each of those would take, and I just said, how much money do I have? How much time do I need? And that's the bottom amount that I'm willing to pay people, because I have the money. I don't see the point in hoarding it if I have it to pay. So that's how I sort of figured out the bottom. I ended up paying $250 per day for the job, but that calculation got me to 200, which I think was kind of close. This one, I'm really sad that I have to bring up, but as I'm doing research for this talk, I saw a number of jobs that were posted either below the living wage or very, very, very close to living wage. And I think you have to remember that if you're posting jobs that are below the living wage, someone else is paying for the rest of that. So you're excluding the entire applicant pool that doesn't have free money from other sources. And I think that's definitely for me not a filter that I'm willing to put on my applicant pool at all. And I know it's a very, very difficult challenge, especially for a lot of indie projects like mine. We have very, very limited resources, but I guess maybe I've been through the ringer enough that the skill of rescoping has reached very high on my list. But yeah, trying to find, I think I should always ask the question of if, for me, the purpose of the company is to work together, create something special, get some money from the economy. There's no reason for my company to exist. So I think that's a lens that I use of if you do a calculation and the maximum you can afford is not something someone can live on, maybe it's strong to say I don't think you should be an employer. Maybe I'm speaking too strongly. But the second thing I went to was salary surveys and benchmarks. So it's another guide to think about well, how much are people being paid already doing this? And I don't want to put people in a position where they say, I love your project and therefore I'm willing to sacrifice myself financially for this thing. It's just not a position. It's not a question I want people to have to ask. And again, it's also another filter on your applicant pool. So I think it was really important for me to check these things. I guess this new salary survey is brand new, so I didn't get to check that one. I checked the old one when it was out of date. But mostly I also asked all my friends that do these kinds of jobs, how much they are being paid and how much they think someone that would be able to do these kinds of tasks was being paid. And that was kind of my way of doing it. And the third thing I think is really, really important, and this is a lens that I use all the time in all the companies I've ever worked with, is just what is the top person being paid and what is the bottom person being paid? And so, there's a very publicly known company that, these are the figures for their lowest paid employee and the highest paid employee. And it's 444 times more, which I don't know if there's any Mandarin speakers here, but that's a really scary number to the Chinese community. But also it's just I feel it should be a really scary number for any human being. I think you have to jump through quite a lot of hoops to think that one person's time is worth, 10 times as much as another person's time, let alone hundreds of times, let alone 400 times. So I think it's a very important lens that I keep. And I also worked at a company recently where the ratio is 1.1. So basically, if you've worked there for a year, you get about a 10% bump. Otherwise, everyone's paid the same amount. And I could do a whole talk about this, even though it's not even my company. But the things it did for creativity and collaboration in that company, I never would have expected. I joined the company because I wanted to steal some of their story technology, but I ended up learning so much about company culture from them. And the idea that like if everyone's paid the same, you're never saying like, oh, how much is this person being paid? Should I be like worrying about that? Should I be competing with them? Is this person doing less work than me? Am I being mistreated in this kind of situation? It's like we all just showed up, we did work, and we talked about the work. Like it was really like eye-opening and interesting for me, and I really enjoyed my experience there, and I'm going to try and replicate as much as my budget will allow this kind of thing. And I guess one of the key things here is that I've seen this ratio before as well when the salaries are terrible, and I'm like, that's not as good. Like the fact that everyone was on 58K as a minimum, like I think we're at a point where if I was running a company and I was like, oh, well, we have people on 30K and people on 50K, and we've got another like 100K left, I would definitely focus on the 30K people. It's just going to make a bigger impact on their lives, in my opinion. So yeah, I think that's an important thing to think about. But I also think it's important to think about these same numbers as they come to success. I think tons of companies only think about what if we fail. Like the phrase I hate the most is war chest. I hate when companies are like, oh, we need to build up the war chest because what if something goes wrong? Because I know, as someone who's been a shareholder in a lot of companies, the war chest is money that the shareholders get to play with. Like that's what that is. So I think companies should always think about what are the measures you put in place and how do you audit and correct for if a game is massively successful. Like one thing that I always think about is like there's a lot of games I've worked on that have been very, very successful. I contributed to the full production of the game, but the next game they worked on wasn't for me, so I left. And I never saw any of the proceeds of the game that I worked on, because like most profit sharing, bonus, or revenue share schemes are based on if you still work here and we're still extracting value for you for capitalism, then we'll give you a little bit of the pie. But if you've moved on and you're doing other great things somewhere else, well, it's not our problem anymore. So I think that always bothers me. Like I've worked at a lot of companies, and I heavily bias when I join companies that have either a profit sharing scheme that is not based on employment or share schemes, because those shares are mine forever. And if you sell the company, I get my cut. So yeah, those are the lenses I use to think about money. And basically for me, I calculated I could afford about 200. And then I got some money from the UK Games Fund. I'm like, and all my friends are saying 250. I'm like, I can afford 250. That's basically how I ended up at the number I ended up with. I don't have a ton to say about this section, but like I kind of muddled through it. But I really enjoyed it. Like I thought, a lot of people would say like 350 applications for review is just like overwhelming. I thought it was so much fun to like meet 350 people talented in things that I can't do. Like this is great. Like this is the best time ever. And like, I very much did, even from the get-go, think about it like this is the beginning of a lot of relationships, and I'm only going to hire 2 people, but I can form a lot of relationships through this process. And I think one of the things that I did that, I don't know, some of my friends told me is a bad approach, but I thought it was great. Instead of like having a checklist of like, I want this person to have like this in their writing sample or these kinds of things, I just read all the applications. And if there was something joyful in there that made me really happy, like very Mary Kondo-ish, I was just like, they make the short list. Like if, even there was someone that wrote just a cover letter that just made me laugh like the entire time. I'm just like, how fun would it be to come to work and work with this person every day? Like it's worth having a conversation. I think trying to find like little moments. There was, I tried to spend not too much time on each application because I had 350 to get through. But I remember there was a Twine game that one person posted as one of their writing samples. I played the first scene. I'm like, oh, this is so good. And I know the twist. I'm just like, I gotta get to the end to see the twist. I thought this was gonna be like 5, 10, 15 minutes, 45 minutes later. I'm just like, there it is. And I knew it. I was right. And I was just like, it was just so joyful for me to like experience something they created. And obviously I'm trying to create something that's joyful as well. So like, I think it was important for me to build a short list out of like, these are the highlights. This is the best of this person, rather than like, this is like a bunch of filters that I'm putting people through. And then I guess I got to the point where I had a short list of 30 people for the first position. I'm like, oh, I can't. I don't think I can interview 30 people. So I ended up like, I think if I had fewer applications and fewer great applications, that would have been the bar. If there's something in your application that brings me joy, I want to talk to you. And we'll come back to that because that was actually a true statement. But I was like, okay, I've got so many people and I'm not going to interview 30 people. So I was like, okay, what's another like barrier I can put in there, even though like I'm making a game that talks about how bad gatekeeping is. I'm like, I need a gate to like save me here. So basically I was like, okay, there's got to be something. The thing that's great about them has to be in the writing sample, and it has to like have some bearing on the game that I'm making. So I was just like, I just need to filter this down. So I ended up with 12 applicants to interview, and I did it over 2 weeks. I've never had so much fun. Like one thing that it made me personally realize is like I've always really been interested in narrative, but like the number of steps you have to get to contribute story ideas from programming to narrative, it's a lot of steps. And like any company I tried at, I'd like, get close, but it's like I've got all this programming work to do as well. Like I never got anywhere, but I think this is a thing I really love. And I think even doing these 12 interviews made me feel like, you know what? I love talking about narrative, and I love talking to narrative about people that are passionate and great at it. And I just thought, this is, if I could do this every day, I would. And I'm like, oh, wait, I'm going to hire someone. I can talk to them about this. It's going to be great. So yeah. And then one thing I didn't do that I kind of regret is I didn't send the questions in advance. And this is contested, and the reason I didn't do it is like I was very anxious about people doing unpaid work. I was like afraid that I'm like, oh, if I send these are the interview questions, they're going to spend like 3 days, panicking and trying to find the perfect solution for this kind of stuff. And like that's definitely not what I want to do. But I feel like in the heat of the moment in an interview, when someone asks you for examples, it's really hard to come up with examples. So like I'm like when I do, hopefully I'll get some money to do some more hiring. But when I do that, I definitely will find a way to say like, here's the questions in advance, but please don't spend too much time. Write down some quick notes that you don't want to forget for the interview, but don't overdo it. And then I showed the game first thing. Maybe this is because like I'm an indie, and like if 12 more people know about my game, I'm happy. Like that's not zero for an indie game. So I just want to make sure that they have the context to like answer the questions that we were talking about. And I made sure to phrase like all the questions of like, just tell me a time that you did something great. Like every question was a variety of either tell me a time that you did something great, or there's a thing that my little programmer brain cannot fathom. You as a narrative designer and writer, how would you think about this? So those are kind of the two categories of questions that I asked. And the answers were so varied and so interesting and so much fun. Like it made me feel like I just wanted to just keep interviewing writers all day long. So yeah. And at the end of the day, the other thing is pay for tests. I didn't actually need a test for either of these roles. I think the writing samples and the portfolios were just so strong. Like I think of the 12 people I interviewed, I ended the interview saying like, there's definitely 8 of these people that could do this job. There's no question about it. And then there was 4 that I'm just like, they could all do the job like amazingly, and I want to work with them. I'm just like, I only have budget for one. And it was like, you can ask my wife how annoyed she got at me just going like, but what about this person? What about this one? What about this thing? But I'm going to lose this part. But this person has this experience. I was like, oh, it was torture for her at least. But yeah, at the end of the day, I picked a writer, and a lot of people think the moment you send the offer and it's accepted, you're done. And I am here to say that is absolutely not true. Like it's very, 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 very important. And I've been on the other side of this as an applicant. I've applied to jobs where they either sent a rejection letter. I had one that sent me a rejection letter 9 months later, which is not particularly useful when you're, actively job hunting. But countless companies that have never ever responded. And I think this is incredibly rude. As coming from an American to a British person, this definitely goes in the rude category. And I think it's just like there's so many people that are trying to make decisions on their life based on your decisions as a company. And I think for you to ever just take that for granted is just really horrible. And it just, one of the things I said at the bottom is like use software. Smart Start has a free package. Home Run has a free package. You can just hit one button and send all the rejection letters at once. I did not think that far forward. I had to do it manually. And the way I did it manually was that I had to break it down into 3 tiers. I really wanted to write like a wonderful letter to every single person about what I like so much about the application, but like that wasn't feasible. So for all the people I interviewed, I gave, really specific feedback about their interview and their writing samples. I mean, luckily for me, most of it was things that I loved. And then I made sure to say that I really wanted to keep in touch, and that was a genuine statement. And I also asked for, I have a lot of, other indie friends, and a lot of them are playing with narrative as well. And I knew that they all had a bunch of openings as well. So I asked permission from a handful of them to say, like, I think you'd be a really great fit for this. Is it all right if I pass on your information for that? But yeah, like, one of the people that didn't get the job, I speak to like on a weekly basis still, just talking about like narrative and things that she's doing and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's really great. The second were all the people that I had shortlisted, but I didn't get a chance to interview. I try to give a little bit of feedback there. But I also gave them all like a Calendly link to say, like, if you want to spend some, like, I really, enjoyed your application and I'd love to meet you and talk to you. If you could find any value in speaking to me in any way, a lot of them were from like theater or journalism or some other writing discipline. And I thought, like, some of them might find value in like asking me what it's like in the games industry, or like how they can more tailor their application to that kind of stuff. So I offered that to all those people, and a bunch of them took me up on it. And a bunch of, one of them sends me like, I showed her my game, and she sends me recommendations of cool things to do in London that would inspire me for my game, like every month. And I'm like, this is the best. Like, I just love like how much research that she's doing on my behalf. And like the only sad thing is, like, because of COVID, they're almost all like these super small indie physical enclosures. I'm like, I can't do that anytime soon. And then tier 3 was everyone else, and at least I replaced each person's name. I think twice I messed that up. I probably should have not put names in there, to be honest. But it took me about 2 to 3 hours to like send out all 350 rejection letters, and like I thought it was well worth it. And I think I should have actually counted. I think I genuinely got about 100 emails back saying, like, really interested in the project, would love to like follow you on Twitter or join a Discord to hear more about it, or this kind of thing, or like best wishes, or and it was just, I think that's the part that really broke me, of just like, yeah, like I've seen companies that don't respond to people, but it's just like, yeah, seeing how people responded to even me saying, you have no job, like I give you nothing, like how much gratitude there was there just really kind of like made me realize, yeah, we can do a lot better as employers on the side. That's my last slide. Yeah, so the summaries are that job descriptions should always keep in mind self-selection. So try to write based on the absolute core of what you're looking for, which is usually the tasks involved. There's a really cool tool as well that I use. It's called the Gender Decoder by Kat Matfield. And I'm not saying just like put your words in there and put in all the replacements they say, but it's like it flags up a bunch of word choices and common associations with those word choices, and you can decide if that's an association that you want in your job application or not. I think that's a really valuable tool that I found along the way. Genuinely, I think pay people as much as you can. I think the point of companies should be to make people money, not shares or magical corporation points. When you're reviewing applications, look for highlights rather than like reasons to reject them. And lastly, just respond to everyone in a reasonable amount of time. Like, I cannot emphasize that enough. like I had someone reach out to me to do like some consultation on the hiring process, and I said, like, I've seen your hiring process. I know you don't respond to people. They're like, oh yeah, it is really important. I'm like, are you going to start doing it? They're like, no. Okay, great. But yeah, that is me. I don't think there's another slide. Oh yeah, there's no slide after that. But yeah, does anyone have any questions? Yeah, I'm going to drink some water. Is there? Oh, I think we are.
On the topic of diversity, obviously some of the bigger studios, because of how long they've been going, the leadership teams are white male. When building a new team within that, obviously it'd be great to show a lineup of a much more diverse cast of people, and we can't do that. How do you? What's a real, way of showing your intent, even if you can't show it in the current standing?
I think you can't show the intent without any like actual tangible actions, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure there's people within the organization that not only do their job great, but bring a new perspective to meetings that perspective is not already represented in. And I think those are things that you should really consider from the get-go. And if it's like, if your team is non-diverse from the top to bottom, like start at the bottom, I mean, obviously also start at the top if you can. Like, I think there's a lot of extremely qualified people like that you can bring in at higher levels as well. I mean, people do leave companies, like there are opportunities. But I think like at least I would be very skeptical of a company. Like I put it in my job description, but it happens all the time of just like, here's a bunch of requirements that are utterly impossible for anyone to meet, especially, people of a diverse background, because we're requiring 45 years of whatever. And it's like diverse applications welcome. It's like, well, they're not. Like I think, make sure that when you have an opportunity to make your team more diverse at the top, you really, really take it. Like, find the communities where those jobs will be circulated. I mean, obviously, Puck and Play has a jobs board, Bayman Games has a jobs board. There's, Limit Break has all the groups now. There's like Women in Games. There's a lot of places when you have these opportunities that come up to capitalize on it. And if it's like, oh, well, these opportunities come up once a year and we only get someone diverse 1 out of 15 times, it's like, well, that speaks for itself.
Right, thanks.
Anyone? Yep.
Thank you for a great talk. As a programmer, I've had huge frustrations with the hiring process on both sides, either by putting hours of work in for an application to be ghosted, or being part of a hiring process and just begging other people to skip pointless interviews and code tests, etc. So just to give you a chance, do you have any silver bullet advice that you'd like to scream to the heavens for like how programming hiring practices could be improved in the industry?
Yeah, I think the simplest part of it is that when people are paid for their time, it's way harder to waste. And so like, for programming tests and that kind of stuff, like as a company, like if you're paying for those tests, you're going to be, thinking about the applicants a lot more, rather than saying like, this person, is like not really going to get the job, but like we'll take a punt and make them do 2 days of work. And like, obviously, usually in those times you have someone lined up that's like a home run anyway, and then you give it to, that person as well. So it's just like, I think as companies, once you start respecting people's time and paying for it, it will make you make better decisions. But obviously from the applicant side, like, I mean, I don't know, like it's that power dynamic, right? Like they have the power, and if you really want the job, like you've got to jump through their hoops. And like, obviously I'm hoping from the employer side, more people have less of these arbitrary hoops. But yeah, I think it's definitely slow going. And ironically, the more power a company has and the more money a company has, the less they pay people and the less they think people are human. So I don't have any hopeful message, unfortunately, on that side. I think it's just like bit by bit. But like, I think one thing for me is like, if I'm in a position to push back on these things, like I definitely can. And I definitely have been in application processes where I fed back that like, this is absurd. Like it's bad enough to put me through it, but like someone that like is less familiar with this specific problem is going to spend 4 times as much time on this, and it's unpaid, and they might have another job, or they might, regardless, their time is valuable, and like we can't be doing this nonsense to people.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, thanks for a great talk. For the job applications that you put up, this was for like contractors?
Yeah,
for
this was
short
just
positions, yes.
Yeah.
Do you think that you would modify this for full-time employees in any way? And do you think you would modify it or like change certain things for like new graduates or people with less experience in that sort of regard?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the first part is like for a full-time position, some of the modifications I'd make, for example, is that like on that thing, I would definitely phrase it as, here's what we need you to do now, and here's what we need you to do in 6 months. I think that's a really great way to phrase things. I think on top of that, like I ended up not needing to do any of the writing tests because the contracts were so relatively short that it's just like, it's going to take me this long to figure it out anyway. So it's like a probation period kind of. So I might put a little bit more emphasis on writing tests if it was for a full-time position, or more likely what I would do is like as a small indie studios, I would do contract to full-time, which isn't a great thing to do, to be honest, but it's just like, it's a structure that sometimes like works well when you're super low on budget and you might never be able to afford a full-time person. And then in terms of like trying to get more graduate applicants and like supporting graduate people, I'm very well aware that in these two roles, they were going to be the only writer on the project and the only artist on the project, and no one was going to be there to support them. And it's not fair to bring a graduate in on that. So like, I've very much been thinking like, okay, like where is there like a graduate opportunity? And it's just like, well, I could definitely hire a programmer. Like I love mentoring people and that would be great. But I'd also love to get to a point where, you know, I could hire graduates. So the company that I mentioned that I work for, they hire graduates all the time and they get paid the same as everyone else. And they get treated equally. And you wouldn't believe how fast they ramp up. Like, because they don't have to worry about like being underpaid and working from home in a flat with 5 other people and these kinds of things. Like I didn't think that would have been the case, but they ramp up so quickly when they're paid well and they can focus on work. So yeah, like I would love to be in a position where I could do that eventually with all the positions, but right now I'm just like, the only one I could bring in a graduate on and not feel like they were just being abandoned would be programming, because I can mentor that position. And I think that's really important when hiring graduate. I think you should always try to make a plan for how you can get graduates in, but remember, you can't just like, I've definitely seen people like, oh, we've got low budget, hire a bunch of graduates. It's not a fair treatment of them. So yeah, I definitely would structure. I think the job description would probably be similar. The task would probably be a little bit different, but not that different. But yeah, I would very much think about the infrastructure within the company to support them before I did that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, we got one more.
Just a super quick question about you talked about the number of interviews and the time to respond. What was the total sort of sourcing time?
The total sourcing time, let's see, I had the application live for about 2 weeks, and then I did the interviews over the next 2 weeks, and then I responded to everyone literally the day that the offer was accepted. So about a month. Yeah, it was fast, like shockingly fast. Oh, I don't know what that says, but oh, 5 minutes. I think we might. Do we have any more questions? Oh, there's one.
Thank you. Hey, we're currently in the process of like hiring extremely experienced people. That's what we were after.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of not putting arbitrary filters on, because I'm like, oh yeah, 3 to 5 years. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
But how do you better word it that you're like wanting somebody with that experience?
So focus on the skills that you actually need from them. So like, you know, for example, like, you know, one of the things that's common in my field is just like, you know, low level machine language optimization. Is just like, you're not going to get a grad that's like mastered that. You know, I think it's, you know, it's one of these things of like, if you can say, here's the things we need them to do. Like one of the things could be like, one of your skills is to mentor the junior, you know, members of the team. And like, you know, you definitely don't want someone that doesn't have, you know, the experience to do that. So like, it's very much think about like, what are the things you actually need them to do that they would have only learned from that however many years of experience. And then if it's like, oh, there's nothing that they really need to do, it's like, do you really need a senior person is the other thing. I feel like a lot of people feel like number of years worked is somehow synonymous with skill level. You know, not to brag, but like, you know, my experience was that, you know, I came straight out of university, went to Insomniac Games in Burbank. After my first year, I was the lead single player programmer. After 2 years, I was the lead gameplay programmer of the whole department. And it's just like, if you had, you know, a year's required thing, it definitely would have said more than 2. You know, and I never would have been in that position. But because I came from the inside, it was just like, okay, well, we see they have the skills. We know exactly what someone needs to do in this position. And weirdly, that guy over there does it. Like, you know, so I think, yeah, focus on what are the actual things that they need to be doing that they would have learned in these many years. And if there's nothing that's actually specific that they need to do that they couldn't do straight out of school, like, you probably don't need someone senior.
Thank you.
Any more? Great. I guess thank you so much for coming to my talk.